didn't think I'd have a story to share on here so recently. Now for a little context, we have a really bad issue with our neighbours. Not bad towards us, but they're drug dealers. Could do worse stuff, but I don't know. I only know about the drugs because the owner of the house's little sister, who was in high school with me, told me. She was removed from their custody and they actually got the SWAT team called on them last year. I've met the owner's partner. I'm not sure what she was to him, but I know she had 2 young kids. They were probably about 7 when I met them. I don't know what happened to them. Now the context is set up, the story. I was at home during winter holiday break from college. My mum and I found out really late that the Netflix show Lucifer just aired its final season. We loved the show and watched it together. My dad was at work and he usually works from around 5 PM to 4 AM. So, my mum and I decided to binge the second half of the season this night. We meant to watch like 2 episodes, but we all know you never really stop at 2. Anyways, so we're up at 2 AM in the morning, watching one of the last episodes. Throughout the night at this point, starting I believe at 8 PM, we heard our neighbours yelling outside. I told my mum to ignore it because it's not our business. It continued on and off for the rest of the night until around 1:30, when we heard them arguing on our porch. My mum and I just kind of look at each other, because why would they bring their argument onto our porch? Like, there's a fence between us, so that means they had to purposely go around the fence just to get to our porch. So they argue for another 30 minutes, and then everything goes quiet. We figured they'd left, only for someone to start kicking at our door and trying the handle. It was locked, thank God, but my mum and I were on our feet. My mum tossed me her phone and told me to call 911, while she made sure our side of the door was locked. We only have a front and a side door, and an extra crappy thing, only my mum's room has a lock on the door. So I call, telling the operator someone's trying to get into the house. Then my mum starts talking to the operator, explaining what's going on. Now, I have a bad habit of not having my phone on me around my parents. I'm a total bookworm, have been since I was a kid, and phones usually distract me from reading or drawing, as I'm an art student. I usually have it up in my room charging. Because of this, I ask my mum if I need to call Dad. She nods, and now I need to go upstairs to get my phone. I'm scared to turn on the lights, so I crawl upstairs in the dark to get my phone. I call my dad and try to look outside of my windows. I couldn't see anything, but I explained the situation to my dad. He's rightfully freaked out and says he'll come home. My dad works 20 minutes away. I was still scared. A lot can happen in 20 minutes. I then stupidly hang up in the panic and go downstairs to my mum's room. The person is now at the front door, kicking more aggressively as my mum and I hide in her room. I call my dad again, telling him I don't want to die, and begging him to be on the phone with me. He agrees as we hear the banging stop. The operator says the police will be over in a few minutes, and my mum looks out the window. I yell at her, explaining that if the person who's trying to get in saw that, they'd know where we were. As I'm explaining this, we get confirmation that the police are there. I tell my dad, the operator confirms they found someone at our front door, and it was safe to come outside. So my mum does. I peek my head outside and see the neighbour's partner talking to police. She explained that she needed help, and that's why she tried to break in. I'm not sure if I believe that. Why would she try both doorknobs? Regardless, the police ended up taking her down to the station, and my dad stayed home that weekend. So, if you really need help, lady, I hope the police managed to help you. But please, let's not meet again. This is a real story that has absolutely traumatized me and my boyfriend. 2 years ago, I moved to the UK for university, as I'd always wanted to go there. This also to get away from my parents, as the situation at home was beginning to become too toxic for me. In my first year at uni, I moved into student accommodation and met some really great people. It was a good year, just enjoying my time away from my family and discovering what independence really meant. Anyhow, as I entered my second year, I decided with some friends to move into a house. It was still rented by student accommodations, but at least we had our own house, and we weren't as restricted with the noise and parties as we were when we lived in the small shared flat. No, I had a ground floor room, and my window gave me a view into a very small backyard. I'd use this backyard every day to have a smoke, as I'm an avid smoker. There's also a gate to the other side of the street to put the bins out and whatnot. The gate could only be closed and locked from the inside of the backyard, but since it was an old gate, we had to attach some strings to keep it closed for good. The house had neighbours on either side, so we were surrounded by families, as well as some other student accommodations. The neighbours to the right of us were 5 boys, who looked way above the age of being at university. They were strange to say the least. I met one of them outside of our house one day because of a police intervention. This was due to one of the flatmates attacking him and the others with a kitchen knife and burning their kitchen down. I heard some screams, and so I went outside with my flatmates. We saw one of them covered in blood, cuts all over his arm and a wound on his head, inflicted by the kitchen knife. My flatmates and I didn't know what to do, so we offered him help to clean himself and gave him an old t-shirt to change out of his bloody clothes. We then saw the guy who hurt him being escorted out by the police and arrested. After he was driven away, we have no idea what happened and never got any updates. Anyway, the guy who he helped was quite weird. He said a lot of bullshit, kept trying to grab me and flirt with me, and we noticed when helping him that he smoked quite a lot of marijuana. We didn't really care at the time because we were more concerned with making sure he was okay. Then after some time had passed, I'd often go to uni and come back home to see him in the street, and I just never said a word to him again. But one day, he came up to me in the street while I went to the corner shop and started talking to me weirdly. I didn't feel comfortable at all for some reason, so I just didn't respond to him. He then just said, "Oh, that's okay. I'll just wait in front of your house then, and we can talk further." Needless to say, I was creeped out, and just thought he was joking, so I bought my drink at the shop and headed back to my street. As I turned into the street where my house was, I saw him with his flatmate sitting on my doorstep waiting for me. So I panicked and went back to the corner shop and called my only male flatmate to ask him to open the door and tell the guys to go away. But of course he wasn't home, and no one else was either. I decided to literally just wait it out until they left an hour later. I then sprinted back home and locked the front door. It was worth noting that my front door has a glass panel on it where you'd be able to kind of make out who was standing in front of it. After this already pretty scary encounter, I just tried to avoid the guy and mostly succeeded for a while. Then one day, as I was smoking in the backyard, I noticed that the wooden gate, which is always closed, was open, and the strings that were put there to keep it closed were cut off. For whatever reason, I didn't think anything of it, and I just closed the gate again and put a new string on it. I must have thought it was one of my flatmates who took out the bins and just didn't tie it back. The weird neighbours would often scream, yell, and fight in their house, and it would wake my flatmates and I up in the middle of the night. We just kind of got used to it after a while. One evening, my boyfriend was sleeping over like he usually did. He, who usually never ever wakes up because of a noise, woke up in the middle of the night because of a bang and some whispering. I was sound asleep, so he very silently woke me up, and we both just waited in the dark and listened for any other noises. Suddenly, we heard the wooden gate bang, and it just shot open, and there were some footsteps next to my window. I always had my window open because it would usually get really warm inside. We both just froze. And then we heard the door leading to the backyard get shaken softly, as if they were trying to get inside. Then they stopped. Luckily, we had the curtains closed, so they couldn't see us. We were ready to get dressed and get the fuck out of the room and lock them in, if they came in from the window. Then we heard my window move, opening more, and one of the guys said something in a language that we didn't understand, and we heard them trying to get in. My boyfriend and I just shot up out of bed, grabbed my phone, put clothes on, ran out of the room, and ran out of the house. I called my flatmates and told them to lock themselves in their rooms, and only then I called the police, who luckily came in less than 5 minutes. The police station was only a couple of streets down from us. I don't remember anything after the police came. I think my boyfriend and I were in shock. They ended up catching one guy, while the other fled, and was later found a few streets up smoking weed. The police told us they went inside of the house and found a lot of meth and heroin, and that they were carrying a massive kitchen knife with them. I was so confused as I've never done anything to offend or done anything wrong to my neighbours. So the idea of them breaking in with God knows what intentions and a kitchen knife terrified my boyfriend and I. The two guys ended up being arrested, and one of them was put in prison for 2 years for carrying a weapon with intention to harm. I never heard anything else from the police, and I moved back home a few months later as I was so scared. It tormented me for months on end, not knowing what would have happened if my boyfriend didn't wake up. I'm still coping with it now, and finding it really tough to get over. I'm always asking myself, what if? Now I often wake up because of the slightest noise and get horrible nightmares because of it, but hey, at least I'm still with my boyfriend and we often talk about it and it helps a lot. So to my old neighbours, let's not meet again. When I was 25, there was a short time I was staying at my aunt's. It was her, my 2 cousins, and I. She lived in a nice apartment complex, and her unit was on a lower level. Her living room had a lot of windows that she kept open for fresh air and for her cats to people watch. Her unit happens to be on the corner near a grassy courtyard path. When I had first moved in, I noticed a man who gave me an off vibe. My cousins and aunt said he lived upstairs and 2 units over, recovering from hard drugs that permanently messed him up. His parents paid for him to stay there as they didn't want him with them. They also said other than hearing him mumble and say weird things, no one had ever had an issue. My aunt works nights and leaves at 3 AM. My younger cousin works nights and leaves at 2 AM. They usually left my same age cousin and I, the only two there, until we leave for work at around 8. For context, it is a very open living and dining room plan. My aunt always has people staying over, so she has a second couch in the dining room in place of a table. This was where I slept. She stayed on the one in the living room. My aunt has also never been one to lock her doors, until this incident. One night, I'm on my phone trying to sleep at about 1 AM and I hear a man yelling. He's yelling, "Don't shoot," and banging on the door to the right of ours. 2 male college students lived there and just told him he had the wrong apartment and to leave. He said sorry, and walks off. I'm looking through the kitchen window, which is in direct line of sight from the couch bed, and it's the weird neighbour who sees me and grins. He then walks back to his home. I was unsettled, but not enough to wake up anyone else over it. I told my family nonchalantly the next day in a bit of a "lol, that was weird" kind of way. My cousin and I watch a movie and head off to bed. I have a very hard time staying asleep, but I woke up this time to the feeling of someone watching me. I check my phone and it's around 3:30 AM, so it's not just my aunt and my cousin. I sit up and figure I'll go watch TV on my aunt's couch since she was gone already. The feeling gets stronger as I'm in the living room. Then I see the shadow of a person standing still in the grass courtyard looking in. I froze. I immediately go back to my couch to get my phone. As I do, the person is gone. I'm now trying to calm myself down, and I think of waking my cousin up when I hear the creepy man's voice. He's now at the kitchen window, which looks out directly in front of her front door. I drop to the floor out of his line of sight, and start frantically trying to call my cousin. The man is now saying things at the window front door like, "I'm not going to hurt you," and "I'm unarmed," over and over again. His face is up against the window. Then he starts talking about wanting to pet the cats he saw through the window. I can't get a hold of my cousin. It's been 20 minutes of this at this point. In this completely clown shit situation, I didn't have many options. I could jump up and run for a knife, but I need to get to the kitchen. I could try to respond and ask him to leave, but I've learned when you underestimate crazy, you lose every time. I now hear him knocking and knocking while repeating his nonsense. I'm doing that ridiculous looking army crawl snake slither across the floor down the hall now. I see the door handle start to turn. I'm about to jump up when my cousin bursts out of his room directly across from the front door. Now he's not the biggest guy, but boy was he intimidatingly mad at the circus show taking place out front of his door. He starts yelling at the guy that he needs to get the fuck off his porch and that he's calling the cops. The man tries to say, "I'm unarmed. I'm not going to hurt you. Don't be afraid." My cousin goes off and yells, "That's fucking dandy. It's 4 AM. You need to leave? I'll call the cops. What the fuck is wrong with you?" So this guy backs up with his hands in the air and leaves. Needless to say, we didn't go back to sleep. My aunt was called, who called the apartment manager. The next day when I came back home from work, his parents were packing moving boxes into a truck from his place. Maybe he was trying to get me to open the door by seeming friendly. Maybe he had a bad trip and really wanted to pet a cat to feel better. We will never know.